Walters is back for another season as the official bar of the Nats Chat podcast. Walters is the best spot to go before and after home games, located at the southeast corner of Capitol and N Street, right across the street from the ballpark.
34,000 plus all around Nationals Park on their feet. Runners lead first and second, 2 out. Finnegan sets the kick and the pitch. Swinging a fly ball to right field. Dylan Cruz moving back, shy of the track, backpedaling there. He makes the catch. And bang, Zuma, Curly W's in the books.
And welcome to Nats Chat for Thursday, February 27, 2025. 1 month to the day of the Nats 2025 regular season opener. Nats versus the Philadelphia Phillies at Nationals Park on Thursday afternoon, March 27th at 4:05, along with MASNsports.com Nats insider Mark Zuckerman, who is in West Palm Beach, Florida, signed to Nats spring training. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. The Nats exhibition season is underway. Nats 3-1 so far in this exhibition season, and doing really well for the Nats so far in this exhibition season is the man who Nats president of baseball operations and general manager Mike Rizzo last July called the Nats forgotten prospect, outfielder Robert Hassell III. Where might he fit into the Nats outfield picture? We have that to discuss. We also have the return of reliever Kyle Finnegan to discuss. He's being re-signed. Quite the journey for the Nats and Finnegan these last few months, but perhaps all is well that ends well. We also have yet another sign of the, shall we say, thawing of the relationship between the Nats and Baltimore Orioles. It on Monday morning became official. The two teams will conclude their 2025 exhibition seasons against each other. O's at the Nats at Nationals Park on Monday afternoon, March 24th at 1:05. You can find us on X at Nats_chat. You can find us on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. You can email the show, natschatpodcast@gmail.com, including if you would like to sponsor the show. We'd love to have you on board. All kinds of ways that we can serve you. Hit up the man who runs the pod, Tim Shovers. Again, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. And we have a website that you can check out, natschatpodcast.com, at which you can purchase a Nats Chat Podcast t-shirt. Mark, hello. Good to talk to you. A month away from opening day, a little more than 2 weeks now into Nats spring training. By the way, I've noticed this. So the Nats this year at spring training, a lot of former Nats players serving as guest coaches. It appears more than normal. Is that correct? Are there more ex-Nats players as guest spring training coaches this year as compared to other years?
Absolutely, a lot more. They've sometimes had, 1 or 2, maybe 3 tops, and I think this year the number is like 8, and there's a bunch more still to come over the course of the spring. And I think it ties in with the 20-year anniversary. They're going to have the big celebration. It's the second homestand of the season against the Diamondbacks, and they're going to have a lot of these guys and maybe some others that come back in for sort of a 20-year celebration of the franchise. And it's nice. This is the kind of thing that most teams have and have had for a long time. When you have some history, you can bring back the old guys and they carry some weight. And hey, here's the guy who used to be the ace of this team. And here's the guy who helped lead us to the playoffs the first time. And they speak to the current players and their words carry some weight. They may not be all superstar players, but they matter in the history of the Washington Nationals. And so I think it's a great sign that they've finally gotten to that point where there is enough history that you can start calling on these guys. And I'm glad to see it. And some names of guys that you don't necessarily think of as the most outgoing, like people that were thrilled to come back and affiliate with the organization after they left, like Danny Espinosa is scheduled to come. Drew Storen is scheduled to come. Jason Worth has agreed to do it for a few days later in the spring. So that's a great sign to me. Jordan Zimmerman, a great pitcher in Nationals history, but not just the most energetic, exciting guy and sort of someone that you figured once he retired would kind of disappear. He's coming down here to West Palm Beach. That's a great sign, all of that stuff. And I'm looking forward to seeing them all. Tyler Clippard's here right now. Ian Desmond was already here. Zim was already here. It's nice to see now this history sort of connecting the generations of this franchise.
I think it's great, and it shows that the Nats do a really good job of engaging with their former players and keeping good relationships with their former players. I mean, let's be honest, it didn't end well with some of these guys. Like Drew Storen's final days with the Nats were not particularly joyful, but it's awesome to see that he and the organization are on the same page. And, with some of these guys, I mean, you think about like a Danny Espinosa, Yeah, like have him work with a Luis Garcia Jr. Like there probably is a ton that Garcia could learn from someone like Espinosa. So this doesn't have to be just like a ceremonial thing. I think there actually is like baseball value in some of this stuff.
Yeah, I saw Ian Desmond working with CJ Abrams the other day. Of course, absolutely something that should be taking place. Espinosa absolutely work with Louis in the field. Let's stay away from the plate. Let's let the other offensive-minded people help him with that. Danny was a little hard-headed when it came to his approach at the plate. You don't want that necessarily to rub off on everyone else.
Well, a man who we thought was a former Nat now is back to being a current Nat. The saga of Kyle Finnegan. Boy, there's like a book that could be written about what has happened with the Nats and Kyle Finnegan this offseason, but he is being re-signed. Tuesday afternoon reports that the Nats and Finnegan have agreed on a one-year, $6 million contract. It was this past November 22nd at 8 p.m. Eastern that we had the deadline by which MLB teams needed to tender contracts to arbitration-eligible players, or else those players became free agents. The Nats on that night announced having tendered contracts to all unsigned 40-man roster players with the exceptions of two relievers, Kyle Finnegan and Tanner Rainey. And as we have discussed, the decision to non-tender Finnegan was shocking. But he lingered on the free agent market for months. He had been expected to get between $8 million and $9 million via being arbitration eligible. Presumably, he was awaiting a deal along those lines. That deal did not come. And over these last few weeks, it was interesting. The drumbeat seemed to grow louder for, hey, what about Finnegan coming back to the Nats? And Mike Rizzo, when he got asked about Finnegan, certainly did not shut the door and essentially seemed to say, it's kind of up to Kyle, but we're open to this. And sure enough, it now is happening, and the Nats end up re-signing him for less than they would have spent on him via Finnegan being arbitration eligible. So there's a lot here to process. I mean, I still think the issue of why he was non-tendered is fascinating. But beyond that, the fact that they get him back for $6 million, you got to wonder, like, if you're Finnegan, you probably weren't in love with the idea coming back to the Nats. You probably felt disrespected, whoever made the call to non-tender you. So I do think it shows maturity on his part to come back to the team. And it's a funny deal, right? We're multiple weeks into spring training, but it would seem that he's walking right back into being the Nats closer, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because look at what the alternatives were. Look who else they had. And I think this is the reason that I and a lot of people felt like this was probably inevitable, that it was going to happen eventually. And it was just this kind of standoff between the two sides over money. I don't think the Nats disliked Kyle Finnegan. They just didn't believe he was worth $8 to $9 million, given his strengths and weaknesses, which we've gone over, I think, ad nauseum over the course of the winter and even during the season. So Finnegan, and rightfully so, wanted to hold out, thought he would maybe get some more interest from other teams. Maybe he would get something closer to that $8 to $9 million that he thought that he deserved. But as the winter played out and as we got into the spring, those offers just clearly were not there. And so it's this game of chicken now. Who's going to budge first? And, the Nats clearly needed someone with some actual ninth inning experience. I think they acknowledged that. Even if they tried to say up front, oh, hey, we're good with Jorge Lopez and Jose Ferrer as our closers. And Finnegan, you get to a certain point, you're a month away from opening day, as you said. You start waiting beyond that, you're not really going to be ready. You're rushing to get ready for opening day. So it felt like we were at that make or break point. Something's got to give here. I don't know what the exact negotiations were between the two sides, but this kind of falls in line with where I thought it would end up. It's obviously not $8 to $9 million that he thought he deserved, but it is $1 million more than he made last year through arbitration. I don't think he could accept anything in the fives or, God forbid, even lower. That would be a pay decrease from last year. So at least he saves face somewhat. He gets $1 million raise. He comes back to the team that he will get to close for, at least to start the year, I believe, where maybe other teams weren't going to be able to offer him that kind of guarantee. And if I'm Kyle Finnegan, I mean, good on him, as you said, for brushing aside the business part of all this and saying, this is the team I came up with. This is the team I care about. They're giving me the best opportunity. And if I'm him, I'm saying, I'm going out there and doing the best job I possibly can, save as many games as I can, have as low of an ERA as I possibly can, and try to now re-energize the market next winter when he'll be a free agent. And maybe he does get that deal that he believes he's worth then.
There are certain realities, too, that if you're Kyle Finnegan, you had to be cognizant of, right? So Finnegan is older than I think some people sometimes realize. He's going into his age 33 season. You know, you don't want to be playing little games so much once you're well into your 30s and you're coming off a very mixed season and you've lingered on the free agent market for a while. You know, he's not a guy necessarily viewed as like having this great upside. He looks young. He keeps himself in great shape. He's been durable, but age 33 season, like he's a veteran reliever. Let's make that clear. The other thing is this. So with a guy like Finnegan, right, who, you know, has his strengths, but also has his flaws, as we have discussed, gives up a lot of hard contact. Coming back to the Nats, coming back to a coaching staff that knows him well, that has had him for years now. Davey Martinez, pitching coach, Jim Hickey, the pitching strategist, Sean Doolittle. These guys, you could argue, will maximize Kyle Finnegan. And so if you're Finnegan and you want to go back into the free agent market next offseason and do better than 1 year, $6 million, this probably is your best path. Come back to a familiar team, be around familiar coaches. You're going to be walking right back into being the closer. You know, how many other teams would present you with that opportunity? And away we go. So this actually could end up working out really well for Kyle Finnegan. I think it makes sense. I mean, this was kind of one of these deals where each side kind of needed the other, you know, as much as maybe they didn't want it. I think the Nats needed Finnegan back. And I think you can make the case that Finnegan needed to be on the Nats given the market that he encountered upon entering free agency.
There's a relationship there. They both know each other. They really are a good fit for each other at this stage of the game. And we've dissected all the things about, is Finnegan actually good at this, or are these his flaws? Is he truly a top-notch big league closer? And here's what I would say. Is he better than anyone else they currently have? Yes. Certainly more proven than anyone else they have. Is he worth, what would he have been worth, 8 to 9 million? That's debatable. I can understand why you would say maybe he wasn't worth that. Is he worth 6 million? Yeah. On this team, yeah, he absolutely is worth 6 million. And here's why. It's not just about the performance, but it's the consistency and the durability. We talk so much about relievers. You never know what you're going to get year to year. Well, here's a guy for 4 straight seasons, 65 appearances at least, and an ERA between 3.5 and 3.7. Would you like that to be between 2.5 and 2.7? Of course, you'd rather have that. But you know he takes the ball. You know he keeps himself in great shape. He's not going to be fazed by the ninth inning. Yeah, he might blow some saves, as most guys do. But he's worked his way up to that role. He's not intimidated by it. You throw Jose Ferrer out there on opening day, you don't know how that's going to go. Maybe it's great, but you have no idea. We've seen some very good and talented relievers get spooked by the ninth inning before. It happens. Finnegan has been there, done that. That's not going to be the reason that he struggles if he does. So I just think it made too much sense on the Nationals' part and on Finnegan's part. And what I really like about it is it allows everybody else in this new remade bullpen to move into a role that's better suited for them. If they tried to go into this without that proven closer, you're asking guys now to do things that they're not really equipped to do at this stage of their careers. Now, you run down the list and, okay, that doesn't look so bad. And it's just so funny to see how this all played out. They had no bullpen a month and a half ago. I mean, they had nothing to get excited about. And now look where they are. And I'd like to refer back to our January 6th episode, if we could. I made a prediction on that one in our discussion about the bullpen. Hey, Tim, can you roll the clip on that one? I'm going to make a prediction here on January 6th and say that at least 4 members of the Nationals opening day bullpen are not currently in the organization. That's how many moves they still have to make, and that's how many moves I think they will make. All right, so I said 4 members of the opening day bullpen were not in the organization yet at that time on January 6th. Since then, what have they done? They signed Jorge Lopez. That's one. He's going to make the team. They signed Colin Poche to a minor league deal. Not guaranteed, but chances are if he's healthy, he's probably on the team as the second lefty. They signed Lucas Sims after spring training began. Guaranteed deal. He's on the team. And now they've signed Kyle Finnegan. There's your 4. Maybe there's still time for someone else, but that's 4 guys who were not in the organization in early January that now look like locks to make the opening day bullpen. It makes that bullpen look so much better than it did not that long ago.
They had to make moves. I mean, the bullpen going into spring training, you looked at it, you said, okay, this is not complete. And maybe it's still not complete, but yeah, there certainly were transactions that needed to take place. And they are, in fact, happening. I mean, 1 year, $6 million, That's not too bad if you're a reliever lingering on the free agent market multiple weeks into spring training. Lucas Sims got 1 year, $3 million. So, Finnegan, I know it's not 8 or 9, but he'll be okay. You don't need to do a GoFundMe for Kyle Finnegan. He'll be just fine. So to put a bow on the great mystery of the Nats 2024-2025 offseason, who ordered the non-tendering? Who ordered the code red? We have been wondering this for months on this podcast. I don't know if we know anything more now than we knew then, but we know how the saga has played out. So what do we think? Was this something that was the result of a paltry budget that Mike Rizzo was given by the Lerner ownership group? Was this truly a Mike Rizzo call? Did Mike Rizzo masterfully foresee that Kyle Finnegan would linger on the free agent market and could be re-signed for less than $8 to $9 million? Can we say anything now that we couldn't say a month ago?
Here's my sense of it. I think it starts with the budget that ownership gives Mike Rizzo at the beginning of the offseason. It says, here's how much you have to spend. Here's what we're looking at for payroll for next year. And as Rizzo's going through it all, he says, okay, I'm going to pay this much for this, and I got this for that. And, can I afford $9 million to retain our closer? Is that going to hamper me from doing something else? Do I believe he's worth $9 million? And I think in his mind, he said, no, I don't think he is. Maybe if I've got a much higher payroll, I can justify that. But with what I'm working with here, that's not going to cut it. That's going to prevent me from doing something else that I need to do. So I'm going to take a chance here and non-tender him with the possibility of re-signing him or signing someone else who could be out there. And in the meantime, I'm going to use those funds to try to patchwork some other things. Let's say, for example, and we don't know that this is exactly how it worked, but they spent $3 million on Jorge Lopez. So you do the $3 million for Lopez, now the $6 million for Finnegan. That's $9 million right there. Are they better off with both guys for $9 million or just the one for $9 million? You would think they're better off with both of them. Now, did he know for sure it was going to work out like this? No, probably not. But I'm guessing, go back to last July during the trade deadline, when he clearly was listening to offers for Finnegan and clearly did not get an offer that he thought was worthwhile. I'm betting that he did have a sense of what the rest of the market thought of Finnegan as a true frontline closer worth whatever that is to go along with it in terms of either prospects or in terms of salary. And he was willing to bet that there wouldn't be as much of a market for Finnegan this winter that maybe Kyle himself thought there would be. And he was proven right. So I give Mike Rizzo credit. If it's three-dimensional chess and he pulled it off, good on him. But I think it stems from probably what he was told the budget would be at the outset. And if he's given a bigger budget, he probably doesn't have to think twice about it and just tenders him and pays him the $8 to $9 million.
That's interesting, though. So you think that Mike Rizzo, when he did not trade Kyle Finnegan prior to last season's trade deadline, had it in his mind, talking about Rizzo, that he might non-tender Finnegan come the offseason?
He didn't know how he was going to struggle the entire second half. But I think seeing that other teams were not valuing him the same way the Nationals did in terms of what they were offering in a trade, maybe when it came time for the non-tender, he said, you know what? I'm not so sure that there's going to be this huge market for him if I let him go. And in the end, there wasn't a huge market for him as far as we know. And now he's back with them at a reduced salary.
It's fascinating. 9 times out of 10, these non-tender decisions are pretty obvious and you're not surprised by anything. This, to me, is one of the more interesting ones that we've had with a Nationals player.
The one thing I will say here, from a pure baseball business perspective, it all worked out for them in the end. But I do wonder, is there another cost to it? And that is perception around the rest of the sport, relationships, and all that. Is Kyle Finnegan, depending on how this year goes, is he going to trust them again? Is he going to want to come back? Do other free agents out there look at how the Nationals did this and say, is that really an organization I want to go to? And we discussed how when it comes to trying to convince free agents to come here, you're already at a disadvantage because they haven't been winning in a few years. And you sometimes have to overpay or you got to sell them on the idea that this is a better place to go to. I'm not saying this move alone changes that whole dynamic, but guys in the game speak to each other. Word gets around. Is there a reputation around the sport that the Washington Nationals might nickel and dime you in some cases like this? And does that hurt your ability to get a free agent to come here when maybe they have other options?
Well, we got an email from our friend Bob in Virginia along those lines, and he brought up the Nathaniel Lowe arbitration scenario, the Nats defeating Lowe in arbitration. So they trade for the guy, beat him in arbitration. I know Lowe didn't really want to talk about it with you. Lowe set to make $10.3 million for this upcoming season. Incidentally, the highest paid Nats player on the season, $10.3 million. By my, back of the envelope math here, that's got to be the highest salary for an opening day Nats team since 2010, before Jason Worth, right? You have to go back before the Jason Worth contract, and that was December 2010, a lower highest opening day salary on the Nats.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who else. I mean, when Zim signed his first extension, I don't think he was making that much yet. Maybe a few years after that. No, that's a good point. I mean, Alfonso Soriano, I think, made at least 10 or 12 million the 1 year that he was here. They had a couple of free agents in the earlier years. But no, you're right. It probably goes all the way back to pre-Jason Worth that they would have the highest paid player on the team making 10 million. And again, with Lowe, okay, they took him to arbitration. The team won. So you can say, hey, they were right that it was worth it in the end from a pure business standpoint. But again, at what cost? Did that sour anything in the relationship? Did other people around baseball look at it differently? And, there are teams that operate this way, very cold-hearted baseball business decisions, and they're very successful. You can do it that way. That's not necessarily who the Nationals have always been, though. Are they prepared to become that team? Or is there a chance that they get back into that, player-friendly and giving guys long-term deals and maybe even sweetening deals to try to entice people to come here? We'll have to see over time how that plays out.
Yeah, and you can change this very quickly by making big offers, right? So players can have a perception of the Nats, and then if next offseason the Nats start showing players the money, no one's going to care about Nathaniel Lowe's arbitration in this past offseason or, what happened with Kyle Finnegan or anything else. I don't think there's anything wrong with operating in a prudent manner financially. We get all kinds of feedback to what we say and how we say it. We have never called the Lerners cheap. I don't think that's a fair thing to say. The Lerners spent on players for a number of years. The Nats for a number of years were a top 10 payroll team in the sport. That should not be forgotten. And, if you're operating with tighter financial constraints now, I don't even think that that's necessarily the end of the world. As we have talked about a bunch, though, it has to do with when your head of baseball operations deems it appropriate to spend and he's not allowed to spend, that's when you have a problem. And the concern is that happened this past offseason. But we shall see. Hey, Al Galdi here to tell you about the latest great offer from Window Nation for listeners of the Nats Chat podcast. 2025 National Spring Training is underway, and Window Nation is offering a terrific deal. Save 60% off all window styles from Window Nation and pay nothing for 2 years. Now, this offer will end on February 28th, so you want to act fast in order to schedule your free in-home consultation. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Again, 60% off all window styles, pay nothing for 2 years. But again, the offer does end on February 28th. So time is running out to save big on some of the best windows that you can buy. Window Nation windows are outstanding. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Increase the look, feel, and value of your home. Window Nation windows. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. 60% off all window styles and pay nothing for 2 years. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast.
Both kicks and sends in the next offering, and it's lifted high and deep to right field. John Rhodes running back. He looks up, and this one is gone. Second pitch, Voth throws, is deposited past the right field wall for a leadoff home run by Robert Hassell III. His fourth home run of the season, and the Senators take a 1-0 advantage.
Exhibition baseball for the Nats has begun. We're just a few games into the Nats Grapefruit League season. We all understand how it goes with these Grapefruit League games, right? It's a house of mirrors. You're not sure if what you're seeing is in fact a reflection of reality or is just kind of funny money that's out there, because these spring training games can get quite out of normal. But you like to see what's happening. You like to follow who's doing what. And something that has certainly stood out so far is the performance of outfielder Robert Hassell III, one of many prospects acquired in the Juan Soto Josh Bell trade of August 2022. One of the funnier but also more telling comments from Mike Rizzo over the last year was him last July referring to Hassell as the, quote, forgotten prospect.
This guy seems to be the forgotten prospect, and he's as good as anybody. And this guy can hit, play defense, run the bases, and you know, he's a hitting machine when he's healthy.
And there was a lot of truth when Rizzo said that, because Hassell has kind of become a forgotten prospect. He was well regarded when he was acquired in that trade package from the Padres. He, with the Nats, has dealt with some injury, dealt with hamate bone surgery. His performance in the minors at times has been good, but never has been like overwhelming to where he's like kicking down the door to make you notice him over, you know, a James Wood, a CJ Abrams, if you want to get beyond the trade package, a Dylan Cruz. But Robert Hassell III so far, 4 exhibition games, 11 at-bats, batting average 455, on base percentage 455, slugging percentage 909. He has a home run, 2 doubles, and 2 singles, no walks, 5 runs batted in. So small sample size, we get it. But, you know, even if you're just on social media kind of following people like Mark and who's doing what in these exhibition games, you're seeing that name pop up a good bit, Robert Hassell III. Now, in theory, you say, okay, the Nats are going to want him to get everyday at-bats. So even if he has a great exhibition season, realistically, could he make the opening day major league roster? It would seem no, but I ask you, do you think that is at all in play, or do you think this guy is definitely going to begin the regular season in the minors?
I think it would take something happening to somebody else, like an injury to one of their projected 3 starting outfielders, or just like disaster from their other 4th outfielder candidates, Alex Call and Stone Garrett. We know how they operate when it comes to prospects like this. They want them to play every day. They don't want them sitting on the bench. I cannot see him starting ahead of James Wood, Dylan Cruz, or Jacob Young at this point, again, assuming everybody else is healthy. And he's got a little bit of AAA experience. It's 17 games. He didn't do all that well there. So there's a rational reason there anyways, no matter how he does or whatever else is happening at the big league level, to say, hey, go play at AAA, show me you can get off to a good start and do that. But let's be clear. There's a reason he was so highly touted and why he was a part of that trade to begin with. He was the 8th overall pick by the Padres in the 2020 draft. And 2 years later, in 2022, so the year of the trade, he's rated by Baseball America, MLB.com, and Baseball Prospectus as anywhere between the 26th and 37th best prospect in baseball, and was kind of seen as the more advanced one. He was ahead of James Wood in terms of where he was in the minor leagues. Now, his issues have been injuries. He had a broken hamate bone in his wrist, then some lingering hand and wrist issues over the last couple of years. And it's caused him to get off to some really rough starts to his seasons and have to miss some time. And then he ends up finishing the season kind of strong. He had a great Arizona Fall League this past October, and that set him up well for this. He says he's 100% healthy now, understands that when you're not at 100%, it really does impact your ability to hit the way that you think you can, but he's always had the ability to hit. So I think he's still very much potentially in the future of the organization, but first things first, he's got to go play every day, prove that he's healthy, prove that he can perform, and then you figure out what you're going to do, whether that's somebody else struggling at the big league level, or maybe he's so good that you got to bring him up, and now you find a way to get everybody in there with 4 outfielders and somebody DHs or somebody gets a day off, and they try that. But they don't put him on the team to be the 4th outfielder and sit on the bench. They're only going to do that, as far as opening day is concerned, if one of the regular 3, I think, is hurt or something happens with them.
It's a funny deal. Jacob Young has basically made it that it's a guarantee he's the opening day center fielder. Imagine saying that a year ago. Jacob Young deserves a lot of credit for doing that. He has changed the outfield conversation with the Nats. But, you know, you think about this from a Robert Hassell III perspective. So Dylan Cruz, obviously, James Wood, obviously, now Jacob Young. The Nats have other outfield prospects in the minors. This guy, Dalen Lyle, has gained a lot of steam. I know there has been some talk of maybe, you know, one of these infielders like Seaver King. People have said maybe at some point you put him in the outfield if, you know, there's not a spot for him in the infield. So it's a crowded mix. And so you think about Robert Hassell, like long term, even if he does do well in the minors, you know, what's his path to the majors? Does he become more a trade chip for Mike Rizzo? You know, there's also the philosophy of, hey, if you can play, if you can hit, the team will find plate appearances for you. You know, you could always DH him, some DH others, put him in the outfield, etc. So, I don't think you have to lose sleep over this, but you do think about it. Even if Hassell does succeed, what exactly is the road for him to playing in the majors for the Nats?
Yeah, and that's, as you said, it's Jacob Young has thrown a wrench into all that. A year ago in the organization, they're probably thinking to themselves, hey, our future outfield is going to be, honestly, they probably would have said Hassell in left, Cruz in center, and Wood in right. And then what happens is Jacob Young, remember, he didn't make the opening day roster, but within a couple of days when Victor Robles got hurt, he took over. And he took the position in center field and he ran with it. And he was a Gold Glove finalist and did enough offensively to warrant staying there. And the domino effect of that was Dylan Cruz was now a right fielder and James Wood was now a left fielder. And that's the alignment they want to stick with. Now, things can happen. Jacob Young is far from a sure thing, of course. He's got to continue to play the defense that he did and probably hit a little bit more. So far, so good. He's looked good. He's bulked up this spring. He hit a home run the other day against the Marlins. But it's pretty amazing. He was not really part of the plan going into all of this. There was so much outfield talent on the way up. And basically by virtue of getting there first, I think is what did this. If he's a year behind, if he's now this year where he was last year, he may not even ever get that chance. Certainly not to play center field every day. I think Dylan Cruz is probably their center fielder going into the season, if that's the case. So all the credit in the world to Jacob Young for doing what he did, getting here when he did, and seizing that opportunity before the other guys were ready, because it's now positioned him to at least have a chance to actually make it long term among this incredibly talented group of outfielders they have in their system.
Jacked up Jacob Young, the biceps photo that went viral a few weeks ago. If you know not of what I speak, just search for that on X. The Nats put out a photo of Jacob Young, who looks awesome. And that photo went viral. I tell you, the Nats, you got Jacob Young jacked up, CJ Abrams bulked up. You still have Stone Garrett, who looks like $1 million. The Nats have, they've got some impressive physical specimens on the team.
They do. And we haven't even gotten to how tall a lot of their pitchers are, 6'7", 6'8". But I got to say, if Al Galdi is complimenting your physique, then you know it's legit, because Al has high standards. I know this.
Well, Jacob Young, right? University of Florida. I feel like there's something to when you go to a big time football powerhouse in college like that, you probably have access to a weight room that is just beyond your wildest dreams and, trainers who can really help you out. So not shocking that a guy like Jacob Young can get himself in that kind of shape. It's funny with the Nats, they have this, in theory anyway, abundance of promising outfielders. They're also stacked at third base in theory, right? When you think about, Brady House and Caden Wallace and Yo-Yo Morales. So some positions of strength, and maybe eventually you can use that to your advantage via trade. We talked going into this past offseason that maybe Mike Rizzo tried to upgrade the roster via making a trade. Didn't really happen, although, Robert Garcia for Nathaniel Lowe was a trade. But in terms of dipping into the prospect inventory to get back someone of real consequence, not that Lowe isn't someone of consequence, but to get the idea, trading prospects to get, a veteran starter, that kind of a thing. Maybe the Nats at some point end up doing that.
Walters Sports Bar is available for private events. Visit waltersdc.com/private events for more information.
1 ball, 2 strikes on Austin Riley. Jake Irvin comes set. The runner goes. The pitch swung on and missed. That's 10 strikeouts for Jake Irvin. A new career high, his first double-digit strikeout game, and he strikes out Riley for the 3rd time to finish off 6 shutout innings. What a performance by Jake Irvin here in Atlanta.
Anything else standing out with spring training games so far in terms of performance? I mean, it's early, so, I know it's you kind of almost feel silly reading too much into anything, but what has kind of caught your eye over these first few games?
So as we tape this, they've played 4 games so far. They won the first 3. The 4th one, they got shut out by the Astros 3-0. At least in the first 3 games, the 2 things that stood out to me. Number one, the starting pitchers, they're only going an inning in most of these cases, but really efficient, really good. You had Jake Irvin, then Shinosuke Ogasawara, and then Trevor Williams. Each of them completing their first inning in 8 pitches or fewer. That's a lovely thing to see. Now, you read too much of that in spring training, maybe not, but I know it's something they preach a lot. We know they had trouble getting off to good starts a whole lot last season. First inning troubles were a thing. So just to see that from their, potentially 3 of their opening day starting pitchers was great. And the flip side of that, offensively, they're getting out to really good starts at the plate. They had a 5-run first inning one game, the 3-run first inning another game, and overall some really good quality at bats. They were averaging more than 10 runs a game those first 3 games. Now, again, they get shut out by the Astros. They faced a better opponent in Framber Valdez and then members of the Houston bullpen. So you can't read too much into it, but there have been some good quality at bats. You see guys taking walks. Dylan Cruz has hit some sliders with authority. That's a big development in the bigger picture. He's looked good. Nathaniel Lowe showing patience at the plate to draw walks and then also hit a double off the wall in right field. Josh Bell has looked good the first couple of games. So there is some stuff to like here in the very early going. There's a long way before we really have a better picture of what trends are legit and what is just, a couple of nice days in late February.
The Nats opening day lineup actually seems pretty set in terms of who's playing where. The competition in spring training certainly seems to be on the pitching side with the bullpen and with the rotation. We know that Mackenzie Gore and Jake Irvin are locks. It sure seems like Trevor Williams and Michael Soroka are likely to make the opening day rotation. So would you say that it's safe to say that there's a battle for number 5 going on, and we're looking at DJ Hurst, Mitchell Parker, and Ogasawara in that 3-way battle? No more Eric Fetty, Joe Ross, Austin Voth as the 3-way battle for number 5. Is that the new 3-way battle for number 5? Is that how you view things?
The 3 lefties. I think that's where it's headed. Now, I will say, as we tape this, Soroka has not pitched yet. I think they haven't announced it yet. I think he's going to go Saturday, along with Mackenzie Gore, who has not pitched in the game yet. They have a split squad day on Saturday. I think one's going to start each game. We need to actually see what he's got. I mean, I think under different circumstances, you wouldn't say that Michael Soroka is guaranteed of a rotation spot. But on this team, you go out and pay him $9 million. We just said who the highest paid player on the team is, Nathaniel Lowe at 10.3. Michael Soroka is number 2 at $9 million. You don't do that unless you're planning to put him in your opening day rotation. Now, he may pitch his way out of it eventually, but I think going into it, it is him. And again, Trevor Williams, you give him a 2-year deal. And admittedly, the success that he had last year when he was healthy. So I do think it's those 4 if everybody's healthy. And now it's a 3-way battle for the last spot. We've now seen all 3 of them, very limited sample. Ogasawara got through a clean inning, very efficient, but he was hit hard. There were 3 hard hit balls out of the 4 that he faced. Give him some more time, let him get accustomed to everything and start throwing more of his repertoire. I think he mostly threw fastballs, which is not necessarily his best pitch. So let's see more of that. Mitchell Parker has actually pitched in relief of Ogasawara. I don't know if you want to read anything into that or not. He's still being worked, a starter's workload, but he is pitching behind Ogasawara. And then Hers made his first start here on Wednesday, was really close to getting out of a first inning on a few pitches and being done with it. And then he issued a 2-out walk, gave up a 2-run homer, and the inning kind of spiraled down from there. So not a great first outing for him. It's interesting because we haven't had these a lot over the years, but when it comes time to make that decision of who you're going to pick, how much of it is based on performance and how much of it is based on what you already know about these guys? Like, are you reading a lot in the spring training results, or are you saying, okay, we know what DJ Hurst did last year. We know what Mitchell Parker did last year. We think we know what Ogasawara is, but I think in his case, you do need to read the performance and how the swings look against him in the major leagues. It's going to be really interesting how they make that decision in the end, because I think we tend to, the simple thing to say, well, who had the best spring? And that's not necessarily the best way to do this. You have to look at the bigger picture, I think.
You do, absolutely. I would just say this about DJ Hurst and Mitchell Parker. We all exited last season saying they were bright spots, to varying degrees. I mean, they didn't kill it, but they were pleasant surprises. They, at times, were really good for the Nats. I think it'd be a shame if they both weren't in that season opening rotation. And I think coming out of last season, if I would have told you that it could be that neither guy is in the team's season opening rotation, you would have said, well, there must be a really good reason for that. I don't know if there is or not. Like, should a Michael Soroka be in your season opening rotation over a guy in DJ Hurst, who I think has real high upside? Now, look, I get it. He didn't throw a ton of innings last season. It was like 4 and dive, 5 and dive with Hurst. But when he was good, he was really good. He's a high strikeout guy. I want to see more. I'm curious to see how they look at this. Like, do they look at Hurst and Parker and say, we can build upon what they did last season? Because otherwise, you're talking about those guys beginning the season in the minors, and it just feels like you're going backwards with them off what seemed like real step forward seasons for them last season.
Well, the thing you run the risk of, you can say deep down, like, hey, we're going to need everybody over time because guys get hurt, and that may be true. And just because you don't make the opening day roster doesn't mean that you're not still going to make 20 plus starts for us in the big leagues. But psychologically, how do those two guys handle that if they do get demoted here at the end of camp and they say, well, hang on a second, I was in the rotation last year. I did a pretty good job. You seemed high on me, and now you're sending me to AAA. There's a psychological element to that. How do they handle that kind of situation? Does it make them stronger and now they work to get themselves back up here? Or do they take that the wrong way and like, man, maybe I'm not good enough, or they don't believe in me anymore? I think it's a delicate situation that they may run into here before camp is over.
All right, it's not exactly the end of the Cold War, but Nationals and Orioles at Nationals Park, Monday afternoon, March 24th at 1:05 for each team's final game of the 2025 exhibition season. First time since 2009 that these two teams are playing each other to conclude the team's exhibition seasons. I think this is nice. I think this is good. I wouldn't mind seeing this become an annual thing. And, bigger picture, I mean, we're not going to go crazy over this, okay? This doesn't mean the massive dispute is ending tomorrow, but this is a sign of, shall we say, communication between the two organizations. They can stand each other's presence to at least a certain degree that they have agreed to do this exhibition game on March 24th. Bravo. Good job. And I hope we see more of this kind of thing.
And number one, I do think we're going to see more of it. I think this is just the start of it. And we may find out, down the road that there are more plans to do things like this. And number two, every sense that I get is that the relationship between the two teams is in a much better place than it used to be, that the Lerner family and David Rubenstein have a very cordial relationship. That doesn't mean everything's perfect. They still can bicker over things and have their disagreements over some financial arrangements, but they do talk. They are pleasant with each other. And I think they realize that it's mutually beneficial to help turn this into a good rivalry again. They've played a couple of times over the years in Florida. That's not their scheduling. That's MLB deciding where to send teams for spring training games. This exhibition game in DC, that comes from the two teams themselves scheduling that. And as you said, they did it from 2006 to 2009. They would play a home and home over 2 nights or 2 days right before the season starts. This is just one game, but I'm interested to see where it goes from here. I think it's absolutely a good sign of progress in the relationship between the two sides. And I think it's good for both teams. I don't know how you can't think that this is a good thing for both teams to start doing things like this. The Dodgers and the Angels play each other every year before opening day. The A's and the Giants did. I don't know if they still are with the move to Sacramento and eventually to Vegas. I think the Cubs and White Sox have had a crosstown series before. It's good for the entire region if these two teams have a working relationship. They don't have to love each other. Obviously, the fans aren't going to love each other, but play each other. Take advantage of the fact that you have these two teams nearby and make the most of that and make it a good thing for baseball in both towns.
As someone who grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, has been here my whole life, I have never believed that it has to be that these two teams are at each other's throats. I think these two teams can actually help each other out, can work together. I don't think it's an either-or predicament in terms of attendance. I think if both teams are good, both teams will draw well. We saw that in 2012. We saw that in 2014. This area is very different than what it was in the 80s, 90s. The area has grown big time in terms of population. There is a lot of money in this area, both from a business standpoint and from a disposable income standpoint. Everyone can benefit. Everyone can eat. It doesn't have to be only one team can do well at a time. Like, both teams can thrive. And if they work together, they can actually help each other. So, not to sing Kumbaya here, but I'm glad that there is some communication. David Rubenstein, the Orioles controlling owner, he's an interesting guy. He's a media guy. Like, he does interview shows. He interviews people. He interviewed Commanders managing partner Josh Harris a while back. Rubenstein has a good relationship with Harris. Rubenstein, he'll go on like TV shows. He's out there. I think he understands things in a way that maybe previous Orioles ownership did not. And so the fact that he and Mark Lerner have, like you said, cordial relationship. I mean, are they best buddies? I'm not going to say that, but I think that's good. And, we are getting these signs that things are better. We have this exhibition game. Last May 7th, the Nats and O's wore City Connect uniforms during a game at Nationals Park in an agreed upon arrangement. So, it's not some monumental occurrence, but it's something. For the longest time, we had nothing. So we will take something. And these things are little somethings that perhaps can lead to a bigger something, which would be that Masson dispute ending. But we're a long ways away from that. We understand that. So good to have that. And we're getting closer to opening day. You know, you've been enjoying the weather in West Palm Beach. The weather here in the D.C. area, which was brutal for weeks, has picked up in recent days. So it's been like in the 50s and 60s. The days are getting longer. It is starting to feel like baseball is coming. It did not feel that way as of a few days ago. It is starting to feel that way here.
I'm glad to hear that, although I've been around long enough to know, don't get fooled. It will come back with a bang before it's all over. I've had many a complaint from my wife over the years about a late February or even into March snowstorm, and I was nowhere to be found to help out with that. So don't count your chickens before they hatch. But I'm glad to know that it's been nice. I'm coming home actually this weekend for my little break, and hopefully it keeps up nice weather while I'm there.
You tell us what you think. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. Hit us up on Blue Sky at Nats Chat Podcast. And you can email the show, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. By the way, we are doing shout-outs again this season. If you want to send a congratulations, a happy birthday, a hello to someone who listens to the podcast, we are happy to deliver that for you. Email Tim Shover's natschatpodcast@gmail.com. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
Now the set of the pitch. Swinging a ground ball right side to his left. Garcia has it. Jogging toward first. An underhanded flip to Andres Chaparro. And a Curly W's in the books at Oriole Park at Camden Yards.